Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The Perfect Deal. Sam Maddox had been searching for 18 months. Every property in Belmont County was either overpriced, structurally unsound, or situated next to a highway. His wife Amy had started calling it his white whale, the mythical dream house that existed only in his imagination. But Sam knew what he wanted: 3 bedrooms, original hardwood floors, a yard big enough for their golden retriever Chester, and most importantly, a workshop where he could restore the vintage motorcycles he'd been collecting since his Navy days. The listing appeared on a Tuesday morning in late April. Sam almost scrolled past it. The photos looked too good. A 1920s craftsman with wraparound porch, detached garage, mature oak trees, and nearly 2 acres of land. The price stopped him cold: $187,000. Comparable properties in the area were selling for over $400,000. "It's a scam," Amy said that evening, peering over his shoulder at the laptop screen. Her dark hair was still damp from her nursing shift at St. Catherine's Hospital. "Nobody sells a house like that for less than $200,000. Not in this market." "The listing's been up for 3 days," Sam noted, clicking through the interior shots. Crown molding, original fixtures, a kitchen that had been updated sometime in the last decade. No other offers according to the agent. Because it's haunted, or built on a toxic waste dump, or both. But Amy was smiling now, that small quirk of her lips that meant she was intrigued despite herself. Sam made the appointment for Saturday. The realtor's name was Vernon Haney, and he looked like he'd been selling houses since before Sam was born. 70-something, with liver spots on his hands and a tweed jacket that smelled faintly of mothballs. He met them at the property with a leather portfolio and an expression Sam couldn't quite read, something between eagerness and unease. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Vernon gestured at the house with undisguised pride. Built in 1923 by a railway executive named Thornton. Survived the Depression, 3 hurricanes, and Lord knows how many owners. She's got good bones. The interior lived up to the photographs. 12-foot ceilings, original hardwood that gleamed honey gold in the afternoon light, windows that actually opened without a fight. Amy fell in love with the clawfoot tub. Sam was already mentally mapping out his workshop in the detached garage. "Why so cheap?" Sam asked as they stood in the master bedroom. It was the question he'd been holding back, watching Vernon's reactions. The old man's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Motivated seller. Estate sale. The previous owner passed away, and his children live out of state. They want it gone." "How'd he die?" "Natural causes. Heart attack, I believe. In his sleep." Vernon's tone had gone flat, rehearsed. He'd answered this question before. They walked the property after touring the house. The backyard stretched beyond the garage, a wilderness of overgrown grass and wildflowers that would need serious work. Chester would love it. Beyond the tree line, Sam spotted a structure he hadn't seen in the listing photos. A shed, maybe 12 by 16 feet, built from the same craftsman style wood as the main house, but weathered gray with age. "What's in there?" Sam nodded toward it. Vernon's reaction was immediate and telling. His shoulders went rigid, and when he turned to Sam, his expression had transformed into something uncomfortably close to fear. "That's not part of the sale." "I'm sorry. The shed. It's not included. You can have everything else, the house, the garage, the land, but the shed stays locked. You don't go in there. Ever." Amy had rejoined them, and Sam felt her hand slip into his. "That's unusual," she said carefully. Vernon pulled a folded document from his portfolio with hands that weren't quite steady. "It's all here in the purchase agreement. Very simple terms. You buy the property for the listed price. Closing costs are covered by the estate. Inspection waived if you choose. Only condition is that you never, under any circumstances, enter that shed. The estate retains a key. Someone will come once a month to access it. You won't see them, won't hear them. They'll be in and out in under an hour." "What's in it?" Sam asked. "That's not my information to share." "Is it legal?" "Whatever's in there." Vernon met his eyes. "I've been selling real estate for 42 years. I wouldn't be party to anything illegal. What's in that shed is none of your concern, and if you're smart, you'll leave it that way. Sam and Amy exchange a look. They developed a wordless communication system over 7 years of marriage. Raised eyebrow meant this is crazy, head tilt meant, but maybe, and the slight squeeze she gave his hand meant it's your call, I'll support whatever you decide. Can we talk privately? Sam asked. Vernon nodded and walked back toward the house, pulling out his phone. This is insane, Amy whispered. A mysterious shed we can never open? Strangers accessing our property? This is how horror movies start. It's also $200,000 under market value. Sam looked at the house, at the garage, at the sprawling yard. We've been looking for over a year. This place checks every box except for one creepy shed that we just ignore. How hard can that be? Sam, I spent 6 years on a nuclear submarine, sharing air with 200 other guys, following orders I didn't understand, trusting that the people above me knew what they were doing. I can ignore a shed. Amy studied his face. You're really okay with this? I'm really okay with finally having a home. Our home. He squeezed her hand back. Chester needs a yard. You deserve a bathtub that's not from 1987. And I need a place to work on bikes that isn't our apartment parking lot. The shed is weird. Yeah, but Vernon's right. It's not our concern. She looked at the house, then back at him. Okay, but if bodies start showing up, I'm saying I told you so. They signed the papers 3 weeks later. The home inspection, which they'd opted to get despite the waiver, revealed nothing worse than some outdated electrical in the garage and a minor roof repair needed within the next 5 years. Vernon had seemed almost relieved when they moved forward with the purchase. The day they got the keys, Sam stood in the empty living room with Amy and Chester, listening to the old house settle around them. It smelled like lemon furniture polish and possibility. Home, Amy said softly. Home, Sam agreed. Through the back window, beyond the garage, the shed waited in the shade of the oak trees. Sam had already decided. He wouldn't even walk past it if he could help it. Out of sight, out of mind. For 3 months, that strategy worked perfectly. Chapter 2. The first month. Moving in consumed the first 2 weeks. Sam had saved up 3 weeks of vacation time from his job as a hydraulic systems engineer at Morrison Industrial, and he burned through it all unpacking, painting, and starting the transformation of the garage into his dream workshop. Amy worked her usual rotating shifts at the hospital, coming home to find Sam covered in sawdust or grease, grinning like a kid on Christmas morning. Their neighbors introduced themselves with the casual friendliness of small-town America. To the left lived Dean and Rosie Branch, retired teachers in their 60s who brought over a casserole and unsolicited advice about the local lawn care service. To the right was a rental property that currently housed a rotating cast of college students from Belmont State, 20 miles away. Beautiful house, Dean said, standing in the driveway while Rosie chatted with Amy about the best grocery stores. We were wondering who'd finally buy it. Been empty since old Randolph passed. Randolph? Sam asked. Randolph Giles, previous owner. Kept to himself mostly. Lived here for, what, honey, 15 years. Dean called to Rosie. 17, she called back. Moved in after his wife died. Did you know him well? Sam asked, curious now. Dean's expression shifted slightly. Not really. Polite enough when you saw him, but he didn't socialize much. Spent a lot of time in that old shed of his. Sam felt something cold touch his spine. The shed. Out back. Yeah, we'd see him heading out there, sometimes at odd hours. 2, 3 in the morning. Dean lowered his voice. Rosie used to joke he was building a spaceship or something. But after he died, his kids got weird about it. Wouldn't let the estate sale people touch it. Had it written into the sale agreement that it stays locked. That doesn't strike you as strange? Dean shrugged. People are strange, son. Especially when it comes to their parents' stuff. Maybe he kept his wife's things in there. Maybe it's full of pornography. Maybe he had a model train set up he didn't want the world to see. Point is, it's none of our business. Good fences make good neighbors, and good neighbors mind their own business. It was solid advice, and Sam took it. He didn't mention the shed to anyone else. When his younger brother Mel visited from Pittsburgh that first weekend, helping to move furniture and providing running commentary about Sam's middle-age crisis house purchase, Sam directed him away from the back of the property. When Amy's sister Catherine came by with her husband Johnny and their twin daughters, Sam suggested they let the kids play in the front yard. The maintenance visits happened exactly as Vernon had described. Once a month, on the third Thursday, sometime between midnight and 3 a.m., someone would access the shed. Sam knew because Chester would wake up growling softly, a low rumble in his chest that meant stranger on the property. The first time it happened, Sam had gotten up, grabbed the Glock 19 he kept in the bedside safe, and crept to the window. A figure in dark clothing was walking toward the shed with a flashlight. They unlocked the door, entered, and emerged 18 minutes later. Then they disappeared back down the side path that led to the street. "Should we call the police?" Amy whispered. "That's what we agreed to," Sam reminded her. "Once a month. They're gone. It's fine. It's weird. It's fine," he repeated, more to convince himself than her. June melted into July. Sam settled into a routine. Work Monday through Friday, bikes on the weekend, occasional poker night with guys from Morrison Industrial. Amy picked up extra shifts to help pay down their credit cards. Chester claimed the entire backyard as his kingdom and spent his days chasing squirrels and barking at nothing. The shed simply existed. Sam walked past it a few times while mowing the lawn, always keeping his eyes forward, treating it like a piece of landscape rather than a structure. Once, when Chester's ball landed near it, Sam used a rake to retrieve it rather than get too close. "You're being ridiculous," Amy said, watching from the porch. "I'm respecting boundaries. You're scared of a building. I'm cautious. There's a difference." But she was right, and Sam knew it. Something about the shed bothered him on a level he couldn't articulate. It wasn't just the mystery of what was inside. It was the way Vernon's hands had shaken when discussing it. The way Dean's voice had dropped to a whisper. The way Randolph Giles had apparently visited it at 2 in the morning. By August, though, Sam had almost convinced himself it didn't matter. The house was everything they'd wanted. They'd hosted a barbecue for Amy's nursing friends that had gone until midnight, filled with laughter and bad karaoke. Sam had gotten his first motorcycle, a 1974 Honda CB 750, fully restored and running. They'd started talking about kids, about expanding their family into the 3 bedrooms that currently sat empty. Life was good. The shed was just a shed, and whatever was inside could stay there forever for all Sam cared. Then Chester disappeared. Chapter 3, Gone. It was a Saturday in late August, the kind of humid morning where the air felt thick enough to swim through. Sam had let Chester out at 7 a.m. like always, filled his coffee cup, and settled onto the back porch to sketch out plans for his next restoration project, a 1982 Yamaha Virago that needed extensive work. At 8:30, he called Chester for breakfast. The dog didn't come. Sam called again, louder. Chester was food-motivated to an almost comical degree. He'd once smashed through a screen door because he'd heard the tree jar opening. Not responding to the breakfast call was unprecedented. "Chester!" Sam walked into the yard, whistling. The morning sounds of the neighborhood filtered through, someone's sprinkler system, a distant lawnmower, birds arguing in the oak trees. No golden retriever. Amy appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas. "Everything okay? Have you seen Chester? He's out back. You let him out. He's not responding." They searched together. The yard was large, but not large enough to lose a 70-pound dog. Sam checked the front, thinking maybe Chester had somehow gotten past him and gone to investigate the college kids next door. Amy walked the perimeter of the fence, looking for gaps. They checked the garage, under the porch behind the woodpile. Nothing. "The fence is secure," Amy reported, her voice taking on an edge. "He couldn't have gotten out. He's somewhere on the property." Sam's eyes went to the shed. "No," Amy said immediately. "It's locked. He couldn't have gotten inside." But Sam was already walking toward it. As he got closer, he saw what made his stomach drop. The door was cracked open, maybe 3 inches. A gap just wide enough for a curious dog. "Sam, don't," Amy started. He pushed the door open wider. The hinges shrieked in protest, and a wave of cold air rolled out, sharp with the smell of earth and something else, something chemical and wrong. The interior was dark despite the morning sun, as if the shadows inside were somehow thicker than natural darkness. "Chester," Sam called into the void. From somewhere deep inside came a sound, a whimper, definitely canine, definitely distressed. "He's in there." Sam pulled out his phone and activated the flashlight. Chester, come. Another whimper, but no dog appeared. I'm calling the police, Amy said. This is exactly what Vernon said not to do. We're calling them, reporting the dog inside, and letting them handle it. By the time they get here, Sam, we don't know what's in there. He looked at her, and in that moment, a conversation happened without words. 7 years of marriage, of trust built and maintained, of knowing each other's boundaries and fears and limits. Amy's eyes said, please don't do this. Sam said, I have to. Call the police, he said quietly. Tell them we have an emergency, that our dog is trapped in a structure on our property, and we need immediate assistance. I'm going to grab a flashlight from the garage. I'm not going in. I just want to see. It was a lie, and they both knew it. But Amy nodded and pulled out her phone. The flashlight from the garage was a heavy-duty mag light, bright enough to cut through the gloom. Sam also grabbed a crowbar. He told himself it was for prying open doors or moving debris, but really it was because the shed had scared him from day one, and he wanted something solid in his hands. When he returned to the shed, Amy was on the phone with a 911 dispatcher, explaining the situation. Sam caught her eye and saw the fear there, real and raw. He stepped through the doorway. The shed's interior was not what he'd expected. He'd imagined storage, boxes of Randolph Giles's belongings, old furniture, lawn equipment. Instead, the 12 by 16 space was almost empty. The walls were lined with some kind of dark, ridged material that looked organic, almost like the interior of a rib cage. The floor was dirt, not wood, and it sloped gently downward toward the back wall, where there wasn't a wall at all. Instead, there was a hole, not a basement access or a root cellar, an actual hole in the ground, maybe 4 feet in diameter, descending into absolute darkness. The cold air was pouring from it, along with that chemical smell, sharper now, almost acidic. Chester whimpered again. The sound was coming from the hole. Jesus Christ, Sam breathed. Sam? Amy called from outside. Police are on their way. ETA, 12 minutes. 12 minutes. Sam approached the hole carefully, shining his light down. The beam didn't reach the bottom. The shaft went down at least 20, maybe 30 feet, the walls smooth and uniform like an industrial boring. But no construction equipment had done this. The walls had that same organic quality as the shed's interior, and as Sam's eyes adjusted, he realized they were moving slightly, expanding and contracting like something breathing. Chester, he called down. An immediate response, frantic barking, then a yelp of pain, then silence. Sam's hands tightened on the mag light. Every instinct screamed at him to back away, to wait for the police, to let professionals handle whatever the hell this was. But Chester was down there, hurt, and 12 minutes might be too long. The hole had metal rungs driven into the side, forming a ladder. They looked old but sturdy, the kind of industrial fixtures that were built to last. Someone, Randolph Giles, presumably, had been climbing down there regularly. Sam tested the first rung. It held. Sam, what are you doing? Amy was in the doorway now, backlit by morning sun. Her face invisible, but her voice tight with tension. He's hurt. He's down there, and he's hurt, and I can't just. Wait for the police. 12 minutes. Sam, I'm begging you. I love you, Sam said. If I'm not back up in 5 minutes, tell them I went down. Tell them to bring rope and lights, and tell them yourself, because you're not going down there. Amy's voice cracked. Please, please don't do this. Sam looked at her, then at the hole, then back at her. He thought about Vernon's shaking hands, about Dean's whispered conversations, about Randolph Giles climbing down at 2 in the morning. Then Chester yelped again, a sound of pure agony, and Sam's decision crystallized. 5 minutes, he repeated, and started climbing down. Chapter 4, Descent. The temperature dropped with each rung. By the time Sam was 10 feet down, he could see his breath crystallizing in the beam of the mag light. The walls weren't just organic looking. They were actively pulsing now, a slow rhythm that matched no heartbeat Sam had ever felt. The chemical smell had evolved into something worse, something that reminded him of his submarine days, of confined spaces where air quality was constantly monitored because one leak could kill everyone aboard. At 15 feet, his boots slipped on something slick. He caught himself, heart hammering, and aimed the light at the rung. It was coated in a thin layer of viscous fluid, clear and oily. The same substance covered the walls, glistening in the flashlight beam. Sam, Amy's voice drifted down, distant and tinny. You okay? Yeah, he called back, though he absolutely wasn't. Almost there. 20 feet down, the shaft opened into a chamber. Sam dropped the last few feet and landed in a crouch, mag lights sweeping the space. The chamber was roughly circular, maybe 30 feet across, with a ceiling that curved upward into the shaft he'd just descended. But it was what filled the chamber that made Sam's mind struggle to process what he was seeing. Machinery, but not any kind of machinery he recognized from his engineering background. Metallic structures that bent at impossible angles, covered in the same organic ribbing as the walls. Conduits running like veins, filled with slowly pulsing light. Not electrical, something else, something that hurt to look at directly. And in the center, a raised platform with a control panel that looked simultaneously ancient and far beyond current technology. Chester lay near the platform, on his side, panting rapidly. His right hind leg was bent at an unnatural angle. Chester, hey buddy, I'm here. Sam hurried over, dropping to his knees beside the dog. Chester whined and tried to lick his hand, tail thumping weakly against the ground. The leg was definitely broken, probably from a fall down the shaft. I got you. We're going up. Just stay calm. As Sam tried to figure out how to carry a 70-pound dog with a broken leg up a 20-foot vertical shaft, movement caught his eye. Something was emerging from the darkness beyond the machinery. Sam's hand went to the crowbar he'd tucked in his belt. He stood slowly, positioning himself between Chester and whatever was approaching. The mag light beam found it, and Sam's world tilted. It was a man, or something wearing the shape of a man. Tall, maybe 6'5", dressed in clothes that looked like they were from the 1920s, high-waisted trousers, suspenders, a collarless shirt. But the proportions were wrong. The arms too long. The joints bending in directions joints shouldn't bend. And the face. The face was Randolph Giles. Sam knew this because he'd looked up the obituary after moving in, seen the photograph of a stern man in his 70s with granite features and cold eyes. This was that face, but wrong somehow, like a wax sculpture that was melting and reforming, never quite settling into proper human configuration. You open the door, the thing said. Its voice sounded like it was coming from underwater, distorted and strange. They always open the door eventually. Sam raised the crowbar. Stay back. The dog was bait. We didn't expect it to actually come down, but it served the purpose. The Randolph thing moved closer, and Sam could see now that it wasn't walking. Its feet weren't quite touching the ground. You're stronger-willed than most. 3 months without investigation. Impressive. What are you? I'm the caretaker. Or I were the shape of the last one. Names are complicated in your language. You can call me Randolph if it makes this easier. Where's the real Randolph Giles? Gone. Consumed. Converted. He served his purpose. The thing gestured at the machinery. As will you. Sam's submarine training kicked in. Assess the situation, identify threats, find the exit, prioritize survival. The shaft was behind him. Chester couldn't climb. The thing blocked the only other visible exit. The machinery hummed with unknown purpose. The shed, Sam said, buying time, his mind racing. You've been using people, luring them in. The house is sold below market value. Always to someone with curiosity. Someone who will eventually investigate. The previous caretaker requires replacement every 15 to 20 years. You were selected. Your profile indicated strong will, technical aptitude, military discipline. Perfect attributes for service. Service to what? The Randolph thing smiled, and its mouth opened too wide, revealing rows of teeth that spiraled back into impossible depths. The mechanism. What you see here is merely an anchor point. The true structure exists in 11 dimensions simultaneously. It requires maintenance, calibration, and occasionally new materials. Chester whimpered. Sam's grip tightened on the crowbar. I'm taking my dog and leaving. You'll take nothing. The contract was agreed upon. Vernon Haney explained the terms. You accepted. I accepted not going in the shed. I didn't accept being converted into some kind of... Sam gestured at the thing. Puppet. The contract stipulates you never enter the shed. You violated the contract. Penalty clauses apply. The thing was still moving closer, seeming to float more than walk. Your wife will inherit the property. She'll be curious. Or perhaps the next owner will. The cycle continues. It always continues. Sam's back was nearly to the shaft now. He had maybe seconds to make a decision. Fight an interdimensional entity with a crowbar, or run and leave Chester to whatever fate waited. Neither was acceptable. The police are coming, Sam said. They'll find us. They'll find a shed. A locked shed. The door closes behind you. The shaft seals. We've managed the situation many times. Then why are you talking? Why not just grab me? The Randolph thing paused, its head tilted at an angle that would have snapped a human neck. Conversion works better with willing subjects. Resistance causes complications. I'm offering you a choice. Serve the mechanism voluntarily. Maintain the anchor point. In return, your dog lives. Your wife lives. The house remains yours. Once per month, you descend and perform simple tasks. The rest of the time, your life continues normally. For how long? Until replacement is required. And then I end up like you, a skin puppet for something that shouldn't exist. You end up serving a purpose greater than your limited comprehension can grasp. The mechanism maintains barriers between realities. Without it, your world would have collapsed into dimensional chaos centuries ago. The caretakers are heroes. They simply never receive recognition. Sam's mind was working furiously. The thing wanted cooperation. That meant it had limitations. Maybe it couldn't just take him by force. Maybe the conversion process required consent, or at least compliance. And if it had limitations, it could be fought. I need to think about it, Sam said. You have until I reach you to decide. The Randolph thing was 10 feet away now. Close enough that Sam could smell it. That chemical wrongness, mixed with something like ozone and rotting flowers. Chester barked suddenly, a sharp warning bark despite his injury. The mag light in Sam's hand flickered. For just an instant, the beam cut through the Randolph thing's torso, and Sam saw what was underneath the human disguise, a framework of impossible geometry, angles that bent through spaces that didn't exist, something his brain couldn't properly process. But in that glimpse, he saw something else. A weak point. A connection point where whatever this thing was anchored itself to the Randolph suit it wore. Right at the base of the skull. Sam had been a weapons specialist on the USS Montana. He knew anatomy, physics, and how to apply force for maximum effect. The thing reached for him. Sam swung the crowbar. Chapter 5. The Mechanism. The crowbar connected with the base of the Randolph thing's skull, with a sound like breaking ice mixed with tearing metal. The thing shrieked. Not with its mouth, but with reality itself, a scream that Sam felt in his bones and teeth and the roots of his hair. It staggered backward, the human disguise rippling and distorting, revealing flashes of the impossible geometry beneath. Sam didn't wait to see what happened next. He grabbed Chester, ignoring the dog's yelp of pain, threw him over his shoulder in a fireman's carry, and ran for the shaft. The chamber erupted in chaos. The machinery screamed to life, those organic conduits pulsing with violent light. The walls started closing in, or maybe expanding. Sam's eyes couldn't properly track the movement, his brain refusing to accept the geometry. Behind him, the Randolph thing was reforming, pulling itself back together with sounds like bones breaking in reverse. Sam hit the ladder at a run and started climbing one-handed, Chester's 70 pounds making his shoulder scream in protest. The dog was trying to help, trying to stay still despite the pain, and Sam could have wept with gratitude for the training they'd done together, the trust they built. 10 feet up, the shaft was contracting now, the walls pressing in, those metal rungs getting harder to grip as they bent under impossible pressure. 15 feet. Sam's hand slipped on the slick substance coating the rungs. He caught himself, adjusted Chester's weight, kept climbing. His shoulder was on fire. His hands were bleeding. He didn't care. Behind and below, the Randolph thing was at the bottom of the shaft, looking up. You cannot escape the contract, it called. The house is the contract. The property is the contract. As long as you remain, you belong to the mechanism. 20 feet. Sam could see the square of light above, the shed's interior, morning sun streaming through the open door. 5 more feet. 3. He hauled himself and Chester out of the shaft and rolled away from the opening just as it snapped shut like a mouth. Where there had been a hole in the ground, there was now only dirt floor, completely seamless, as if the shaft had never existed. Sam, Amy was there, dropping to her knees beside him. Oh my God, what happened? What was down there? Chester, his leg's broken. We need a vet. Sam was shaking, adrenaline crashing through his system. And we need to leave. Now. We need to leave the property now. The police are almost here. I don't care. We need to. The shed door slammed shut. The lock engaged with a solid click. Sam scrambled to his feet, tried the handle. Locked solid. He threw his shoulder against it once, twice. The door didn't budge. Sam, you're scaring me. We can't stay here. He was looking around the shed now, seeing details he'd missed in his panic. Scratches on the walls. Deep gouges like someone had been trying to claw their way out. And words, carved into the wood near the door in what looked like frantic, desperate letters. IT doesn't end, it never ends, they always come back. What does that mean? Amy whispered. Before Sam could answer, the sound of sirens cut through the morning air. Police, finally. But as Sam looked at those carved words, at the locked door, at the shed that now seemed less like a structure and more like a trap, he realized something that made his blood run cold. The Randolph thing had been right. The contract wasn't about the shed. It was about the property, the house, the land. And they'd signed papers, legal documents, binding agreements. They owned this place. And the place, apparently, owned them. Chapter 6. Investigation. Detective Chris Kirby was everything Sam had hoped for in a cop. Sharp-eyed, skeptical in the right way, and focused on the dog rather than the weird story. She'd arrived with 2 patrol officers and an emergency vet that Amy had called while Sam was underground. Chester was being treated for the broken leg, sedated and stable, while Sam and Amy sat in their kitchen giving statements. So let me get this straight, Kirby said, flipping through a notepad. You heard your dog in distress inside a shed you'd been contractually obligated not to enter. You went in anyway. You found a hole in the ground. You climbed down, found the dog injured, and climbed back up. The hole then vanished. I know how it sounds, Sam said. Do you? Because it sounds like you're either lying to cover up something or you experienced a medical event. Carbon monoxide can cause hallucinations. So can gas leaks. I know what I saw. What you described isn't possible, Mr. Maddox. Holes don't appear and disappear. In the shed, she consulted her notes. We checked. It's completely empty except for some old gardening tools. No hole. No machinery, just a normal shed. Sam exchanged a look with Amy. She'd been quiet during his explanation, her hand gripping his under the table, her face pale. She believed him. He could see it in her eyes. She'd heard something in his voice when he'd emerged, seen something in his expression that convinced her this wasn't a hallucination or a lie. Can we see the shed? Sam asked. You own the property. You can go wherever you want. Kirby's tone suggested she thought this was a very bad idea. They walked out together, the 2 patrol officers flanking them. The shed sat exactly as it had before, innocent in the late morning sun. One of the officers unlocked it. Apparently they'd forced the lock during their initial search, and pushed the door open. The interior was exactly as Kirby had described. Empty. The walls were plain wood, weathered but normal. The floor was packed dirt undisturbed. A few ancient garden tools leaned against one wall. A rusted rake, a shovel with a cracked handle, a coil of rotted rope. I don't understand, Sam said. He walked to the center of the shed, to where the hole had been. The dirt was solid under his boots. He stomped on it. Nothing. It was right here. Mr. Maddox, I'm not crazy. Sam rounded on Kirby. Something happened down there. Something wrong. And if you just what? Dig up your shed floor on the word of a man who admits he violated a legal contract and might have been hallucinating. Kirby's expression softened slightly. Look, I get it. New house, strange circumstances, pressure of the mortgage. Sometimes our minds play tricks. The important thing is your dog is going to be okay. Take the win. After the police left, Sam and Amy stood in the shed together, searching for any evidence of what Sam had seen. They found nothing. The walls were normal. The floor was solid. There was no organic machinery, no impossible geometry, no sign that anything unusual had ever existed in this space. I didn't imagine it, Sam said quietly. I believe you. Amy was examining the wall, where Sam had seen the carved warning. The wood was smooth, unmarked. Something happened to you down there. Something real. But the evidence is gone, or hidden, or exists in dimensions we can't see, like that thing said. She turned to face him. So the question is, what do we do now? Sam thought about this. About the Randolph thing's words. About contracts and obligations and ownership. About the way the shed door had locked behind them, trapping them outside, but also trapping something inside. We research, he said finally. Randolph Giles. The property history. Who owned this place before him? Vernon Haney, and why he was so scared. We figure out what we're dealing with, and then we figure out how to fight it. Or we sell. Just list it and get out. Can we? What if the contract prevents that? What if anyone who buys it just becomes the next victim? Amy closed her eyes. I really hate that you're right. They started that afternoon. Amy had the next 2 days off, and Sam called in sick to Morrison Industrial. Chester was recovering at the emergency vet, sedated and monitored, giving them time to work. The Belmont County Records Office yielded the property history, built in 1923 by Gerald Thornton, a railway executive. Sold in 1945 to the Emery family. Sold again in 1967 to a woman named Hilda Swift. Sold in 1989 to Walter Martinez. Sold in 2008 to Randolph Giles. Every single owner had died on the property. Gerald Thornton in 1945, heart attack in his sleep. Margaret Emery in 1967, stroke. Hilda Swift in 1989, aneurysm. Walter Martinez in 2008, also heart attack. Natural causes, Sam said, staring at the death certificates. Every single one. Or what looks like natural causes, Amy countered. She'd been searching newspaper archives and found something interesting. Look at this. It was a newspaper article from 1967, shortly after Hilda Swift bought the property. A neighbor had reported strange lights and sounds coming from the backyard at odd hours. When police investigated, they found nothing unusual. Hilda Swift had explained she was an amateur astronomer and often worked in her observatory at night. Observatory, Sam repeated. The shed. More digging revealed similar stories for each owner. Walter Martinez had told neighbors he was conducting experiments in the shed. Margaret Emery had called it her meditation space. Gerald Thornton had described it as a workshop for special projects. Each owner had spent increasing amounts of time in the shed as the years went by. Each had become more reclusive. Each had eventually died suddenly, leaving the property to relatives who wanted nothing to do with it. They're caretakers, Amy said, just like that thing told you. They maintain whatever's down there, and eventually it kills them. Or converts them. Randolph Giles didn't just die. That thing was wearing him, using him. They found Vernon Haney's address in the phone book, an apartment in downtown Belmont. Sam wanted to confront him immediately, but Amy suggested they gather more information first. They needed leverage, proof, something to make the old realtor talk. That night, Sam lay in bed, unable to sleep, listening to the house settle around him. Every creak sounded like footsteps. Every shadow looked like it might contain something impossible. He thought about the Randolph thing's words. As long as you remain, you belong to the mechanism. Around 2 a.m., Chester's absence became too much to bear. Sam got up, intending to make coffee, and found Amy already in the kitchen, surrounded by papers. Can't sleep either? She asked. Kept thinking about those words carved in the shed wall. The ones that aren't there anymore. It doesn't end, they always come back. Amy had been taking notes. Sam, I think I know what it means. Look at this. She'd made a timeline of the property owners and their deaths. The pattern was clear. Approximately every 18 to 20 years, an owner died and the property changed hands. Like clockwork. It's a cycle, Sam said. They use people up and then start over. But here's what I don't understand. Why the big show with the cheap price and the contract? Why not just grab whoever moves in? The thing said conversion works better with willing subjects. Resistance causes complications. Sam sat down heavily. It wants us to choose this. To accept it. Then we don't. We refuse. We fight. How do you fight something that exists in 11 dimensions and can make a 30-foot shaft appear and disappear at will? Amy met his eyes. The same way you fight anything. You find its weakness and you exploit it. That thing bled when you hit it, Sam. It screamed. It felt pain, which means it can be hurt, which means it can be killed, Sam finished. They both knew what that meant. Going back down there, confronting the entity, finding a way to destroy it or at least sever its connection to their property. We need help, Amy said. We can't do this alone. Who's going to believe us? The cops think I'm crazy. Not the cops. Someone who knows about this kind of thing. Someone who studies it. Sam thought about this. A paranormal investigator? A physicist? Someone who understands dimensional theory. Someone who can explain what we're dealing with and how to stop it. It was a long shot, but it was something. As dawn broke over Belmont County, Sam and Amy made a plan. They would find an expert. They would gather weapons and tools. And they would go back into that shed and end this one way or another. The mechanism had chosen the wrong people to trap. Chapter 7. Allies and Enemies. Professor Nicole Parsons taught theoretical physics at Belmont State, 20 miles from her house. According to her university bio, she specialized in multiverse theory and non-Euclidean geometry, exactly the kind of expertise Sam and Amy needed. Getting her to believe them would be the challenge. Sam called her office Monday morning, expecting a secretary or voicemail. Instead, Professor Parsons answered directly, her voice carrying the crisp authority of someone who didn't tolerate time wasters. Professor Parsons, my name is Sam Maddox. I need to discuss something unusual that's happening on my property. It involves dimensional anomalies and... Stop. A pause. Is this a prank? I wish it was. Professor, I'm a hydraulic engineer. I work with measurable systems and provable physics. What I'm experiencing doesn't fit into any framework I understand, which is why I need your help. Another pause, longer this time. Dimensional anomalies. Explain. Sam gave her the abbreviated version. The shed, the shaft, the creature, the machinery. He kept his voice level and factual, describing it the way he described a malfunctioning hydraulic system. Observable phenomena, measurable results, reproducible conditions. When he finished, Professor Parsons was quiet for nearly 30 seconds. Then, I'll need to see this myself. When can you meet? She arrived Tuesday afternoon with enough equipment to stock a small laboratory. Mid-40s, gray hair pulled back in a practical bun, dressed in cargo pants and a university sweatshirt. She set up in the backyard without ceremony, pulling out instruments Sam didn't recognize. These measure quantum fluctuations, gravitational anomalies, and electromagnetic variance, she explained, assembling what looked like a sophisticated sensor array. If there's a dimensional weak point on your property, this will find it. While she worked, Sam and Amy told her everything. Professor Parsons listened without interruption, occasionally making notes on a tablet. When they finished, she was quiet for a long moment. I've spent 20 years studying theoretical frameworks for this exact scenario, she finally said. Multiple dimensions coexisting in the same physical space, separated by barriers so thin they might as well not exist. Most of my colleagues think I'm wasting my career on science fiction. But the math works. The equations balance. And if what you're telling me is true, then I'm looking at empirical proof of my life's work. Can you help us stop it? Amy asked. I can try. But first, I need to understand what we're dealing with. She gestured at the shed. I need to go inside. It's locked, Sam said. And I don't think it's going to open for us. Professor Parsons smiled grimly and pulled a sophisticated-looking device from her bag. This is a quantum lock bypass. Works on the principle that all locks exist in superposition until observed. Don't ask me to explain it in detail. The math takes 6 blackboards. But it should open any mechanical lock, regardless of conventional state. She approached the shed door, attached the device, and activated it. The lock clicked open immediately. Inside, the shed was still empty. Normal. But Professor Parsons' instruments immediately started chirping and beeping, screens filling with cascading data. Fascinating, she breathed. The dimensional barrier here is incredibly thin. I'm reading fluctuations that suggest, yes, there it is. There's a resonance frequency, a specific wavelength that causes the barrier to become permeable. English, please, Sam said. The shaft you described isn't gone. It's just on the other side of a dimensional membrane. Think of it like a one-way mirror. From this side, you see an empty shed. From the other side, something else can see through to our dimension. And with the right frequency, you can make the mirror transparent in both directions. How do we generate that frequency? She pulled out what looked like a modified tuning fork. Already got it. I designed this based on theoretical models of dimensional resonance. Never actually tested it, because I never had a real weak point to test it on. This is either going to work perfectly or explode in our faces. Comforting, Amy muttered. Professor Parsons activated the device. It emitted a sound too low to hear, but felt. Sam's teeth vibrated, his bones hummed, and the air itself seemed to shiver. The floor of the shed rippled like water, and then the shaft opened, exactly as Sam remembered, descending into darkness, metal rungs gleaming in the afternoon light. Well, Professor Parsons said quietly, I guess it works. They spent the next hour making preparations. Professor Parsons wanted samples, measurements, readings. Sam wanted weapons. They compromised. The professor would descend first with her instruments. Sam would follow with protective gear and the crowbar, and Amy would stay topside with instructions to seal the shaft and call the authorities if they weren't back in 30 minutes. I don't like this, Amy said as they geared up. We don't know what's down there. We know exactly what's down there, Sam countered. A machine from another dimension and a thing pretending to be Randolph Giles. And we know it wants us to serve it. So we're going to give it the opposite. Professor Parsons had one more surprise. A modified headlamp that she claimed could detect dimensional shifts. If that thing starts warping reality, you'll see it before it happens. Gives you maybe 2 seconds of warning, but 2 seconds might save your life. They descended together, Professor Parsons first, her instruments casting strange lights in the shaft. Sam followed, gripping the crowbar, his mind running through every scenario he could imagine. The temperature dropped as before, and that chemical smell intensified. The chamber was exactly as Sam remembered. The machinery hummed with alien purpose, lights pulsing through those organic conduits. But the Randolph thing wasn't visible. Incredible, Professor Parsons whispered, moving toward the machinery with the reverence of someone seeing their God. The engineering here is beyond anything we're capable of. Look at these power conduits. They're drawing energy from dimensional gradients. In this control panel, these symbols aren't any language I recognize, but the mathematical relationships. Professor, Sam interrupted. Where's the entity? The what? The thing that looks like Randolph Giles. It was here before. Professor Parsons's instruments suddenly shrieked in alarm. Dimensional shift. It's the Randolph thing materialized between them and a shaft. Not walked, not appeared gradually. Simply was as if it had always been there and they just now noticed. You brought help, it said in that underwater voice. Interesting. The previous caretakers were more compliant. Professor Parsons stared at it, her scientific detachment cracking. What are you? An overseer, a maintainer, a necessary evil. The thing's head tilted, and you are an anomaly. Your species doesn't usually produce individuals who can perceive dimensional structures. You might be more useful than the others. We're not here to serve your machine, Sam said, raising the crowbar. We're here to destroy it. The Randolph thing laughed, and the sound made the chamber walls pulse in sympathy. Destroy the mechanism? You fundamentally misunderstand what it is. This, it gestured at the machinery, is an anchor, a stabilizer. Remove it, and your entire region of space-time collapses into dimensional chaos. Everyone within 50 miles dies, screaming as reality tears itself apart. You're lying. Amy's voice came from the shaft above. She'd climbed down despite their agreement, and now stood on the ladder, her nursing scrubs incongruous in this alien space. If this thing was protecting us, you wouldn't need to trap people into serving it. The Randolph thing's attention shifted to her. The maintenance requires human participation. Your neural patterns, your consciousness, they provide a stabilizing influence. Without a caretaker, the mechanism drifts out of phase. With a caretaker, it remains anchored. Simple. Then find willing volunteers, Sam said. Pay people. Don't trap them in a dying here. The contract was clear. The contract was fraudulent. You manipulated Vernon Haney, you manipulated the property sale, and you manipulated us. That's not agreement. That's coercion. Professor Parsons had been studying her instruments while they talked. Now she spoke up, her voice shaking but determined. He's right about one thing. This machinery is maintaining a dimensional barrier, but wrong about another. It's not protecting us from dimensional chaos. It's preventing something from breaking through. She pointed at the control panel, where alien symbols pulsed with rhythmic light. These are containment protocols. This isn't a stabilizer. It's a prison. And whatever it's imprisoning is on the other side. Try to get out. The Randolph Thing's expression shifted, became almost apologetic. You're cleverer than expected. What's imprisoned here? Sam demanded. Something that would end your world if released. Something that requires constant vigilance to contain. The caretakers serve that purpose. They monitor. They maintain. And when their biological forms wear out, they're absorbed into the mechanism to continue serving in a different capacity. It's an honor. It's murder, Amy snapped. It's necessity. And your refusal to participate has already begun to destabilize the containment. Look, the Randolph Thing gestured toward the machinery. Sam saw what he'd missed before. Cracks in the metallic structures, places where that pulsing light leaked through in irregular patterns. And beyond the machinery, in the shadows at the edge of the chamber, something else was moving. Something huge and formless and hungry. The prisoner is waking, the Randolph Thing said. Because you wounded me. Because the current caretaker is damaged and the replacement refuses to serve. And when it breaks free, millions die. So I ask you again, Sam Maddox, will you serve willingly or will you doom everyone you know? Chapter 8. The Truth. Professor Parsons was frantically taking readings, her hands shaking as data cascaded across her screens. It's telling the truth about the containment failure. I'm reading massive fluctuations in the dimensional barrier. Something is definitely trying to break through. How long do we have? Sam asked. Hours. Maybe less. The thing in the shadows was becoming more visible now, pushing against reality like a hand pressing through a membrane. Sam could see shapes that hurt to look at, angles that couldn't exist, a presence so vast and wrong that his mind kept trying to edit it out of his perception. What is that? Amy whispered. A predator, the Randolph Thing answered. From a reality where the laws of physics permit different biological forms. It was drawn here by a weak point in dimensional barriers. The mechanism was constructed to contain it. That was in 1923, shortly after it nearly broke through and consumed 17 people before Gerald Thornton managed to trap it. Gerald Thornton, Sam repeated. The man who built the house. The man who discovered the weak point and designed the containment system. He gave his life to maintaining it. As Professor Parsons looked up from her instruments, why human caretakers? Why not automated systems? Human consciousness provides something unique, a stabilizing resonance that reinforces the barrier. Your neural patterns, your observation of the mechanism, literally helps hold reality together at this weak point. It's quantum mechanics scaled up to the macro level. The prisoner exists in superposition until observed by human consciousness, and that observation collapses it into a contained state. So we're Schrodinger's jailers, Sam said. As long as someone's watching, the cat stays in the box. Crude but accurate. The predator was pressing harder now. The shadows were peeling back, revealing something underneath that Sam's eyes couldn't properly track. Too many limbs, or maybe no limbs at all. Mouths, definitely mouths, hundreds of them, spiraling in fractal patterns. And sounds, deep and resonant, like the universe, screaming. We need to repair the mechanism, Professor Parsons said. She was already moving toward the damaged sections, pulling tools from her bag. If I can stabilize the power conduits, reinforce the containment protocols. You can't, the Randolph Thing interrupted. The damage isn't just physical. My consciousness was integrated with the mechanism. When Sam Maddox wounded me, he damaged the containment field itself. The only way to repair it is to provide a replacement consciousness. Then unintegrate yourself and let the machine run on its own, Amy suggested. I can't. The process is irreversible. Once absorbed, the caretaker's consciousness becomes part of the mechanism permanently. I am Randolph Giles now, or I was before the damage. Now I'm failing, and the containment is failing with me. Sam was thinking furiously, running through options. What if we destroy the weak point itself? Collapse the dimensional barrier permanently. Then the predator breaks through, and you die within seconds, followed by everyone else in Belmont County. What if we move the mechanism? Set it up somewhere else. It's anchored to this specific location, this specific weak point. Moving it would be like trying to move a patch from one hole in a dam to another. The water would rush through immediately. Then we're trapped, Amy said. Either someone becomes the next caretaker, or everyone dies. Essentially, yes. The chamber shook. The predator was definitely getting closer, pushing harder. Parts of it were starting to phase through the barrier. Appendages that looked like they were made of solid darkness, dripping with something that steamed and hissed when it hit the chamber floor. Professor Parsons was still working on the machinery, her fingers flying over the alien control panel. There might be another option. If I can boost the containment field temporarily, create a surge of stabilizing energy, it might buy us time to find a permanent solution. How would you boost it? Sam asked. With me. She didn't look up from her work. My consciousness, my neural patterns. I integrate with the mechanism voluntarily, provide the stabilization it needs, and use my understanding of physics to optimize the containment protocols. I might be able to make it self-sustaining. Absolutely not, Sam said immediately. We're not sacrificing anyone. It's not a sacrifice if I'm choosing it. Sam, I've spent my entire career studying theoretical physics that no one believed in. This is my life's work made real. If I can use what I've learned to save lives, to prove my theories weren't just academic exercises. By dying, Amy interjected, by letting yourself be absorbed into an alien machine, by serving a purpose, by making my work matter. Professor Parsons finally looked at them, and her expression was calm, almost serene. I'm 53 years old. I have no family, no children. My colleagues think I'm a crackpot. But this, she gestured at the mechanism, this proves everything I've ever believed. And if I can use that knowledge to save hundreds of thousands of lives, then dying here means something. There has to be another way, Sam insisted. The Randolph thing spoke up. There isn't. The professor is correct. Her integration would stabilize the containment, and her expertise would optimize the mechanism. She might even be able to make it self-sufficient eventually, eliminating the need for future caretakers. It's the logical solution, except for the part where she dies, Amy said. I'm dying anyway, Professor Parsons said quietly. Stage 4 lung cancer. Diagnosed 6 months ago. I have maybe a year left, and most of that will be hospital beds and pain management. This way, I go out doing something meaningful, something that matters. The chamber shook again, more violently. Cracks were appearing in the walls, in reality itself. The predator was seconds from breaking through. Sam looked at Amy. She had tears streaming down her face, but she nodded slowly. It's her choice. Damn it. Sam turned to Professor Parsons. Are you absolutely sure? I've never been more sure of anything. She was already moving toward the central platform, toward the integration point the Randolph thing was indicating. But I need you to promise me something. Document this. Everything that happened here. Make sure my work is published. Make sure the scientific community knows I was right. I promise, Sam said. Professor Parsons climbed onto the platform. The Randolph thing began activating controls, and the machinery responded with a rising hum. Light pulsed through the conduits, converging on the platform, on the professor. One more thing, she called out over the noise. If this works, if I manage to make the mechanism self-sufficient, then the house is safe. You can stay. Build your life here. Just remember what it cost. Then the light enveloped her completely, and her scream of pain transformed into something else, a harmonic resonance that shook the chamber and seemed to stabilize reality itself. The crack stopped spreading. The predator's advance halted, and slowly, impossibly, it began to retreat back into the shadows, back beyond the dimensional barrier. The integration took 17 minutes. Sam timed it, watching helplessly as Professor Nicole Parsons was absorbed into the alien machinery, her consciousness spreading through the mechanism like roots through soil. The Randolph thing monitored the process with what might have been sadness or might have been satisfaction. It was impossible to tell with that inhuman face. When it was over, the professor's body was gone, but her voice remained, emanating from the machinery itself. "Sam? Amy? Can you hear me?" "We hear you," Sam said, his voice breaking. "It worked. The containment is stable. And I can see it all now. 11 dimensions. The mathematics are beautiful. Everything I theorized was true. Everything and more." A pause. "I'm going to optimize the protocols now. Make this thing self-sufficient. It'll take time, but I think I can do it. And when I'm done, no one else will have to serve. The mechanism will maintain itself forever." "Thank you," Amy whispered. "Thank me by living well. By using that house. By being happy." The professor's voice was already fading, becoming part of the ambient hum. "And by publishing my research. Don't let them call me a crackpot anymore." Then her voice was gone, integrated completely. The Randolph thing looked at Sam and Amy. "You should leave now. The professor's work will take years to complete. But the house is safe. The contract is fulfilled. You're free." They climbed out of the shaft without speaking. Behind them, the machinery hummed with new purpose, stabilized by Professor Parsons' sacrifice. When they emerged into the shed, the shaft sealed itself immediately. And this time Sam knew it wouldn't open again. Not for him. Not for anyone. Vernon Haney was waiting in their driveway. Chapter 9. Aftermath. The old realtor looked like he'd aged a decade since Sam last saw him. His hands shook as he approached, and his eyes were hollow with something between guilt and relief. "You made it out," he said simply. "No thanks to you," Sam replied, the anger he'd been suppressing finally finding a target. "You knew what was down there. You knew what this property was." "I suspected. I was never certain." Vernon pulled out a cigarette with trembling fingers, lit it, took a long drag. "Randolph Giles told me before he died. The real Randolph, what was left of him. He said the house needed someone strong. Someone who could either serve or find another way. He said the previous owners were weak, compliant. He wanted someone who would fight. He wanted us to end this," Amy said. "Maybe. Or maybe he just wanted someone to share the burden." Vernon exhaled smoke into the evening air. "I've been selling this house for 40 years. Every owner, every death, every transfer. The family keeps the title in a trust that I manage. They don't know what it really is. They just know it keeps getting sold and bringing in money. And I keep taking my commission and trying to forget what I'm doing." "Someone just died down there," Sam said. "A good person who sacrificed herself to fix your mess." I know, and I'll live with that." Vernon dropped the cigarette and ground it under his heel. "But she chose it, didn't she? She knew what she was doing, and she did it anyway. That counts for something. It counts for everything," Amy said quietly. Vernon pulled an envelope from his jacket. "Randolph left this. Told me to give it to whoever made it back out of the shed. I guess that's you." Sam opened the envelope. Inside was a letter, handwritten in shaky script. "If you're reading this, you survived. Congratulations. You're stronger than I was, smarter than the others. The burden is lifted. The house is yours. Use it well. And forgive an old man who didn't have the courage to end this himself. RG." There was also a check, made out to Sam and Amy Maddox for $200,000. "It's the difference," Vernon explained, "between what you paid and what the house is actually worth. Randolph set it aside years ago, said whoever freed him from that thing deserved it. Consider it payment for services rendered." Sam stared at the check. Blood money, in a way, but also recognition of what they'd endured, what they'd lost. "The professor's research," Sam said. "Her notes, her theories. We need to publish them." "I can help with that," Vernon said. "I know people at the university, people who owe me favors. We'll make sure her work gets seen, gets validated." It's the least we can do. They stood together in the driveway as the sun set over Belmont County. Inside the shed, deep underground, Professor Nicole Parsons worked to save a world that would never know her name. And in the house behind them, in the home they'd fought so hard for, a new life waited. "We should check on Chester," Amy said eventually. They drove to the emergency vet together, leaving Vernon in the driveway to finish his cigarette and contemplate his decades of complicity. Chester was awake and alert, his broken legs splinted and stabilized. He barked happily when he saw them, tail wagging with undiminished enthusiasm despite everything he'd been through. "He's a fighter," the vet tech said. "Should make a full recovery." Sam scratched Chester's ears, buried his face in the dog's fur, and let himself feel the weight of the day. The fear, the loss, the impossible choices. Amy's hand found his shoulder, grounding him. "We're going home," she said. "All of us. Together." 6 months later, the house had transformed. Sam had converted the garage into the workshop he'd always wanted, and 3 restored motorcycles gleamed under professional lighting. Amy had started a garden in the backyard, carefully avoiding the area where the shed stood. Chester had made a complete recovery and claimed the entire property as his domain. They never went in the shed again. Once a month, they'd hear the familiar hum from underground, the mechanism running its maintenance cycles, powered now by Professor Parsons's consciousness and optimized by her genius. It was a reminder of what they'd survived, what they'd sacrificed, and what they'd saved. Professor Parsons's research had been published posthumously in 3 major physics journals. The academic community was still debating her theories, but her name was no longer associated with crackpot science. She'd been vindicated, even if the full truth of her final work would never be known. Vernon Haney had died quietly in his sleep 2 months after their confrontation. Heart attack, the doctors said. Natural causes. Sam wondered if the old realtor had finally found peace or if guilt had killed him. They'd never know. The $200,000 check had paid off their mortgage completely. The house was theirs, free and clear, no debt and no obligations. It should have felt like victory. Most days it did. But sometimes, late at night, Sam would stand at the back window and stare at the shed. And he'd wonder about the predator in the darkness, the thing that wanted to break through and consume their world. He'd wonder if Professor Parsons was lonely down there, maintaining her endless vigil. He'd wonder if Randolph Giles had felt this same weight, this same mixture of gratitude and guilt. "Come to bed," Amy would say, pulling him away from the window. "It's over. We won." And he'd follow her because she was right. They had won. They'd fought an impossible battle against an interdimensional entity and a reality-warping machine, and they'd emerged with their lives, their home, and their future intact. The price had been high, but some prices were worth paying. Chester barked from the bedroom, impatient for his people to join him. Sam smiled, took Amy's hand, and walked away from the window. Behind them, the shed sat silent in the darkness, keeping its secrets, maintaining its vigil, protecting a world that would never know how close it had come to ending. But Sam knew, and Amy knew, and somewhere in the spaces between dimensions, Professor Nicole Parsons knew. And that would have to be enough. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there. Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1, Innocence Lost. Vincent Caldwell had always prided himself on reading people. 20 years in the Marines, followed by a decade building his security consulting firm from nothing, had taught him to spot deception from a mile away. Yet somehow, he'd missed the signs in his own home. Sophie bounded into his home office that Tuesday evening, her 8-year-old face beaming with pride as she clutched a piece of construction paper. "Daddy, I made this for you." Vincent pushed aside the contracts he'd been reviewing and pulled his daughter onto his lap. The drawing was typical of Sophie's work. stick figures with oversized heads and rainbow-colored clothing. But this one was special. It showed their family. Himself, Lydia, and Sophie, all holding hands beneath a bright rainbow. "I love it, sweetie," he said, kissing the top of her blonde head. "Let's hang it up right now." As he stood to place it on the cork board behind his desk, his eye caught something in the corner. Tiny words, written in Sophie's careful print. "I'm sorry." A chill ran down Vincent's spine. "Sophie, what are you sorry for?" His daughter's blue eyes, so much like his own, filled with tears. She pointed at the stick figure representing Lydia. "Mommy says this is the last drawing I'll get to make of you." The words hit Vincent like a physical blow. He knelt down to Sophie's level, keeping his voice steady despite the rage building in his chest. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Mommy said, she said you might not live with us much longer. That Uncle Ryan might be my new daddy." Sophie's voice was barely a whisper. "I don't want Uncle Ryan to be my daddy. I want you." Vincent's vision darkened at the edges. Ryan Hoffman, Lydia's tennis instructor, a man who'd been coming to their house for private lessons for the past 6 months. Vincent had trusted his wife, trusted that her sudden interest in fitness was just another of her phases. He pulled Sophie close, inhaling her strawberry shampoo scent while his mind raced. "Listen to me, baby girl. I'm not going anywhere. I promise you that." But even as he comforted his daughter, Vincent was already calculating. He'd built an empire by outthinking his enemies, by being 10 steps ahead of everyone else. If Lydia thought she could blindside him, take his daughter, destroy everything he'd built, she was about to learn exactly who she'd married. After tucking Sophie into bed with extra stories and promises that everything would be okay, Vincent returned to his office. He pulled out a bottle of bourbon and poured himself a generous glass, then opened his laptop. If his wife was planning to leave him, she needed evidence of infidelity, grounds for divorce that would favor her in custody hearings. But Vincent Caldwell hadn't survived 3 tours in Afghanistan and built a multi-million-dollar company by being careless. His personal life was as secure as his business dealings, which meant Lydia was either bluffing or his phone buzzed. A text from his wife, working late at the club again. "Don't wait up. Hugs and kisses." Vincent checked his watch, 9:30 p.m. The country club closed at 9 o'clock. He opened his laptop and accessed the security system he'd installed throughout their house. Cameras that Lydia didn't know about, hidden in plain sight. Vincent fast-forwarded through the day's footage until he found what he was looking for. There, on his dining room table at 2:17 p.m., his wife was bent over while Ryan Hoffman took her from behind. They were laughing, their voices carrying clearly through the audio. "God, I can't wait until you divorce him," Ryan panted. "Vincent's so uptight, so controlling. You deserve better." "Soon," Lydia gasped. "My lawyer says with the prenup, I need to prove he's mentally unstable or abusive. Just a few more weeks of documenting his violent tendencies, and I'll have enough." Vincent's hand tightened around his glass. Violent tendencies? He'd never laid a finger on Lydia in anger, but she was building a case, manufacturing evidence. He continued watching, his expression growing colder with each passing minute. They discussed their plans in detail, how they'd frame him, how they'd take Sophie, how they'd split his assets. Ryan mentioned his debts, his need for Vincent's money. Lydia talked about selling the house, moving to California with Ryan and Sophie. When the footage ended, Vincent sat in silence. Then he smiled, an expression that would have terrified anyone who knew him during his military days. Lydia had made 2 crucial mistakes. First, she'd involved his daughter in her deception, using Sophie as a weapon. Second, she'd underestimated exactly what kind of man she was trying to destroy. Vincent Caldwell had killed men with his bare hands in defense of his country. He'd built an empire from nothing and crushed competitors who tried to take it from him. He'd never lost a war, and he wasn't about to start now. But this wouldn't be a quick, clean victory. Lydia and Ryan wanted to play games. Vincent would show them what games really looked like. Chapter 2. Gathering Intelligence. Vincent's security company, Caldwell Protective Services, specialized in corporate espionage and threat assessment. His client list included Fortune 500 companies, government contractors, and individuals who paid premium rates for discretion. What most people didn't know was that Vincent's team included former CIA operatives, ex-special forces, and hackers who could penetrate any system. The morning after Sophie's revelation, Vincent called his most trusted operative, Luis Morales, a former Army Ranger who'd served under Vincent in Afghanistan. Luis now ran the company's digital forensics division. "I need a full workup," Vincent said, sliding a folder across his desk. Ryan Hoffman and Lydia Caldwell. Everything: financial records, communications, medical history, parking tickets. "I want to know what they had for breakfast 3 years ago." Luis raised an eyebrow. Lydia's inclusion wasn't lost on him. "How deep?" "Ocean floor." "And Luis?" "This one's personal." "Understood, sir." 48 hours. 24. While Luis worked his magic, Vincent played the perfect husband. He brought Lydia flowers, took her to dinner at their favorite restaurant, and listened with apparent interest as she complained about her difficult tennis lessons with Ryan. All the while, he was cataloging her lies, noting the tells he'd somehow missed before. Lydia had always been beautiful, the kind of woman who turned heads at every social function. She'd been 22 when they met, fresh out of college and working as a gallery assistant. Vincent had been 35, recently discharged from the military and building his business. Their courtship had been intense, their marriage seemingly perfect. But watching her now, Vincent realized how little he'd actually known his wife. The way she touched her throat when she lied. How her voice pitched slightly higher when she was manipulating him. The practiced innocence in her eyes when she spoke about Ryan. She'd been playing a long game, probably from the beginning. Thursday morning, Luis delivered his report. Vincent read it alone in his office, his coffee growing cold as he absorbed the details. Ryan Hoffman was even more pathetic than Vincent had imagined. 31 years old, 2 failed businesses, $127,000 in gambling debts to some very unpleasant people in Atlantic City. His tennis instruction was barely covering his minimum payments. The man was desperate, exactly the kind of weakness Lydia would exploit. But it was the information about his wife that truly surprised Vincent. Lydia hadn't just stumbled into infidelity. She'd been planning this for over a year, systematically documenting everything Vincent did that could be construed as controlling or aggressive. She'd secretly consulted with 3 different divorce attorneys, shopping for the one who'd be most aggressive in pursuing his assets. Most damning of all, she'd been slowly poisoning Sophie against him. The report included transcripts of conversations Luis had recovered from Lydia's deleted text messages, discussions about preparing Sophie for the transition and helping her understand that Daddy isn't a good man. Vincent closed the file and stared out his office window at the city skyline. He'd built this view through blood, sweat, and sacrifice. Every building below represented a client he'd protected, a threat he'd neutralized, a victory he'd earned. Nobody took what belonged to Vincent Caldwell. Nobody. He pulled out his phone and scrolled through his contacts, stopping at a name he hadn't called in years. Detective Patricia Grove, now retired but still well-connected in the justice system. Patricia owed Vincent several favors from cases where his company had provided crucial intelligence. "Patricia, it's Vincent Caldwell. I need to discuss a custody matter." Hypothetically speaking, of course. By the end of the conversation, Vincent had a clear understanding of how family court worked, what evidence carried the most weight, and which judges were most sympathetic to fathers who'd been victimized by manipulative spouses. Next, he called his business attorney, Marcus Webb. Marcus had been handling Vincent's legal affairs for 8 years and knew better than to ask unnecessary questions. "I need you to prepare something for me," Vincent said. "A comprehensive post-nuptial agreement. Very specific terms regarding adultery, false accusations, and parental alienation." "And Marcus?" "I need to look like Lydia's idea." "That's complex." "What's the scenario?" "Marriage counseling. She'll suggest updating our legal arrangements as a sign of commitment. You'll draft something that appears favorable to her, but actually gives me every advantage if she violates the terms." "Vincent, if this is what I think it is, then I'm not asking for anything illegal. Just creative." That evening, Vincent sat across from Lydia at dinner, watching her perform her role as the loving wife. Sophie chattered about school between bites of pasta, oblivious to the war being waged around her. "I've been thinking," Lydia said, her voice carefully casual. "Maybe we should try couples counseling, just to make sure we're communicating properly." Vincent nodded thoughtfully. "That's a wonderful idea. I know exactly the person, Dr. Amanda Rivera. She specializes in high-conflict marriages." What Vincent didn't mention was that Dr. Rivera was also a former client who understood the value of discretion and detailed documentation. "And maybe," Vincent continued, "we should look at updating our legal arrangements too. Show our commitment to making this work." Lydia's eyes lit up, exactly as Vincent had predicted. "You mean like a post-nup? Something like that. I'll have Marcus draft something fair for both of us." As his wife smiled and agreed, Vincent felt the familiar calm that came before action. The pieces were falling into place. Soon, Lydia and Ryan would discover what happened when they tried to destroy a man who'd spent his life destroying threats. But first, he needed to secure Sophie's loyalty, not through manipulation like Lydia was attempting, but through truth. Chapter 3. Setting the Foundation. Friday evening, Vincent took Sophie to their favorite ice cream shop, just the two of them. As she attacked a sundae nearly as big as her head, he studied his daughter's face. She had his determination, but Lydia's delicate features, a combination that would serve her well in life if she learned the right lessons. "Sophie, do you remember what you told me about Mommy's drawing comment?" She nodded, suddenly serious. "She said you might not live with us anymore. How would you feel if that happened?" "Sad. Really, really sad." Sophie's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. "Daddy, are you and Mommy going to get divorced like Taylor's parents?" Vincent chose his words carefully. "Sometimes grown-ups make mistakes, sweetheart, and sometimes they have to face consequences for those mistakes. But I want you to know something important. No matter what happens between Mommy and me, I will always be your father. I will always love you, and I will always fight to protect you. But what if Mommy says I can't see you? Then Mommy would be wrong, and Daddy is very good at proving when people are wrong." The next week passed in a carefully choreographed dance. Vincent attended marriage counseling sessions with Lydia, playing the role of the confused husband trying to save his marriage. Dr. Rivera documented every session, noting Lydia's subtle attempts to paint Vincent as controlling and volatile. Meanwhile, Vincent's team worked around the clock. Luis had placed surveillance on Ryan, documenting his gambling, his meetings with loan sharks, his increasingly desperate attempts to find money. Vincent's financial investigator traced every transaction in Lydia's accounts, uncovering her secret apartment rental in Manhattan, the love nest where she'd been meeting Ryan twice a week. But Vincent's most devastating discovery came from an unexpected source: Sophie's tablet. Children's devices were often overlooked in security assessments, but Vincent had installed monitoring software on all family electronics years ago. Reviewing Sophie's recent activity, he found something that made his blood run cold. Lydia had been recording their private conversations, father-daughter moments twisted into evidence of psychological manipulation. She'd edited clips to make Vincent's protective warnings sound threatening, his expressions of love sound possessive. Worse, she'd been coaching Sophie on what to say during the eventual custody evaluation. The recording showed Lydia teaching their 8-year-old daughter to lie about feeling scared of Vincent, to claim he had a bad temper, to say she'd rather live with Uncle Ryan. Vincent listened to these recordings alone in his office, his hands steady despite the rage coursing through him. Lydia wasn't just betraying him. She was psychologically abusing their daughter, turning Sophie into a weapon in her war against her own father. That night, Vincent made a decision that would have shocked anyone who thought they knew him. He wasn't going to expose Lydia's plan. He wasn't going to confront her or try to reason with her. He was going to let her proceed exactly as planned, and then destroy her so completely that she'd spend the rest of her life regretting the day she'd chosen to make Vincent Caldwell her enemy. The postnuptial agreement was ready by Tuesday. Marcus had outdone himself, creating a document that appeared to heavily favor Lydia, while actually containing clauses that would trigger devastating penalties if she violated its terms. The adultery clause alone would cost her everything: custody, assets, even spousal support. She'll sign it, Vincent told Marcus during their final review. She thinks she's smarter than me. And if she doesn't, she will. Lydia's greed always outweighs her caution. That evening, Vincent presented the agreement to Lydia during their romantic dinner at home. Sophie was at a sleepover, giving them privacy for their performance. Marcus outdid himself, Vincent said, pouring Lydia a glass of her favorite wine. This protects both of us, but honestly, it's probably more generous to you than I should be. Lydia read through the document, her lawyer's coaching evident in how she focused on specific sections. Vincent watched her eyes light up as she saw the asset distribution clauses, not realizing that they were conditional on her fidelity. This seems fair, she said finally. Very fair. I want you to feel secure, Lydia. I want you to know that I'm committed to our marriage, to our family. She signed with a flourish, even initialing the writer about mutual respect and honesty in all marital matters. Later, as Lydia slept beside him, Vincent stared at the ceiling and calculated timelines. By his estimation, Lydia would file for divorce within the next 2 weeks. She'd present her manufactured evidence, demand emergency custody, and try to freeze his assets. What she didn't know was that Vincent had already moved the majority of his wealth into overseas accounts and trust funds that were invisible to U.S. family courts. What remained in their joint accounts was enough to maintain appearances, but not enough to satisfy Ryan's debts or Lydia's expensive tastes. More importantly, Vincent had spent the last 2 weeks documenting everything: Lydia's infidelity, her coaching of Sophie, her fraudulent evidence gathering. He had recordings, photographs, financial records, and witness statements that would not only destroy her case, but potentially result in criminal charges. But Vincent wasn't planning to present this evidence defensively. He was going to use it as a weapon, striking at the perfect moment for maximum damage. The war was about to begin, and Lydia had no idea she'd already lost. Chapter 4. The Trap Springs. Lydia made her move on a Thursday morning, exactly 12 days after signing the postnuptial agreement. Vincent was in his office when Marcus called with the news that divorce papers had been filed. Lydia was seeking emergency custody, claiming Vincent had been increasingly erratic and potentially dangerous. She's requesting a restraining order, Marcus reported. Claims you threatened her and Sophie. She has recordings. I'm sure she does, Vincent replied calmly. When's the hearing? Tomorrow at 2 p.m. Judge Hamilton. Perfect. Judge Hamilton was known for his no-nonsense approach and his particular disdain for parental alienation. More importantly, he was one of the judges Patricia Grove had recommended as sympathetic to fathers who'd been set up. Vincent spent the rest of Thursday making final preparations. He called his cleaning lady and casually mentioned that she shouldn't be surprised if Mrs. Caldwell moved out soon. He arranged for Sophie to stay with his sister Emma for the weekend, telling his daughter it was for a special adventure, while Mommy and Daddy worked out some grown-up problems. Most importantly, he activated the final phase of his surveillance operation. Ryan Hoffman was about to have a very bad day. At 3 a.m. Friday morning, Vincent's phone rang. It was Detective Grove. Vincent, I thought you should know. There was an incident at Belmont Park last night. Ryan Hoffman was found beaten pretty severely in the parking lot. Apparently, he owed money to some unsavory characters. That's terrible, Vincent said, not bothering to sound surprised. Is he all right? He'll live. But he's in the hospital with a broken nose, 3 cracked ribs, and a severe concussion. Probably won't be conscious for a few days. What a shame. Right when Lydia needed him most. Vincent had made a single phone call 3 days earlier to a contact who specialized in debt collection. He'd simply mentioned that Ryan Hoffman might be more motivated to pay his debts if he understood the seriousness of his situation. Vincent never explicitly requested violence, but men like Tommy Castellano had their own ways of communicating with deadbeats. At 8 a.m., Vincent received a frantic call from Lydia. Ryan's in the hospital, she sobbed. Someone attacked him. He won't be able to testify today. Testify about what? Vincent asked innocently. The divorce hearing. You know, about your behavior. Lydia, What exactly was Ryan planning to testify about? He's your tennis instructor. What would he know about our marriage? The pause stretched long enough for Vincent to count 5 heartbeats. He's a friend. He's seen how you treat me. I see. Well, I hope he recovers quickly. These random attacks are terrible. By 1 p.m., Vincent was seated in family court with Marcus beside him. Lydia sat across the aisle with her attorney, Janet Morrison, a shark who specialized in high-asset divorces. Lydia looked confident despite Ryan's absence, clearly believing her manufactured evidence would be enough. Judge Hamilton was a thin man in his 60s with the demeanor of someone who'd seen every lie family court had to offer. He reviewed the preliminary filings with obvious skepticism. Mrs. Caldwell, you're requesting emergency custody based on allegations of threatening behavior. I see you have recordings. Lydia's attorney stood. Yes, Your Honor. We have documented evidence of Mr. Caldwell's increasingly controlling and volatile behavior toward both Mrs. Caldwell and their daughter. I'd like to hear these recordings. Vincent watched Lydia's face as her attorney played the carefully edited clips. To someone unfamiliar with the context, Vincent's voice did sound harsh, especially when discussing consequences and protection. The clips were skillfully edited to remove context and emphasize perceived threats. Mr. Caldwell, Judge Hamilton said, "Do you recognize these recordings?" "I do, Your Honor. They're from conversations with my daughter about safety and appropriate behavior. However, they've been heavily edited to remove context. Do you have the full recordings?" Vincent smiled. "As a matter of fact, I do." Marcus stood and approached the bench with a thick folder. "Your Honor, Mr. Caldwell's security company maintains comprehensive audio and video surveillance of their home for security purposes. We have the complete, unedited versions of these conversations, plus additional material that provides crucial context." Judge Hamilton's eyebrows rose. Additional material? Video evidence of Mrs. Caldwell coaching their daughter on what to say during custody evaluations, recordings of Mrs. Caldwell's affair with Mr. Ryan Hoffman, and documentation of Mrs. Caldwell's plan to manufacture evidence against Mr. Caldwell. The courtroom fell silent. Lydia's face went white, then red, then white again. "I'd like to see this evidence," Judge Hamilton said. For the next hour, Vincent's documentation played on the courtroom screens. The unedited recordings showed him as a patient, loving father warning his daughter about adult problems. The video of Lydia coaching Sophie was devastating. Watching an 8-year-old being taught to lie about her father brought visible disgust to Judge Hamilton's face. But the coup de grace was the footage of Lydia and Ryan in Vincent's dining room, discussing their plans in graphic detail. When it ended, Judge Hamilton removed his glasses and cleaned them slowly. "Mrs. Caldwell, do you care to explain what I just witnessed?" Lydia's attorney whispered frantically in her ear, but Lydia seemed incapable of speech. "Furthermore," Judge Hamilton continued, "I note that you signed a postnuptial agreement just 2 weeks ago that specifically addresses adultery and parental alienation. Were you aware of these clauses when you signed?" I didn't. The agreement isn't. The agreement appears quite clear, Mrs. Caldwell." "Mr. Caldwell, what are you seeking in these proceedings?" Vincent stood slowly. "Your Honor, I want full custody of my daughter, with supervised visitation for Mrs. Caldwell pending psychological evaluation. I want enforcement of our postnuptial agreement, including the penalty clauses for adultery and parental alienation. And I want Mrs. Caldwell investigated for filing false police reports and attempting to suborn perjury from a minor child." Judge Hamilton nodded grimly. "Emergency custody is granted to Mr. Caldwell. Mrs. Caldwell, you'll have supervised visitation 2 hours per week until a full psychological evaluation is completed. I'm also referring this matter to the district attorney's office for potential criminal charges." Lydia finally found her voice. "This isn't over, Vincent. You can't destroy me like this." Vincent turned to look at his wife, soon-to-be ex-wife, with the same expression he'd worn while interrogating insurgents in Afghanistan. "Lydia," he said quietly, "this is just the beginning." Chapter 5, Psychological Warfare. The weekend after the hearing, Vincent picked up Sophie from his sister Emma's house. His daughter was unusually quiet during the drive home, her small hands fidgeting with her seatbelt. "Daddy," she said finally, "am I in trouble?" Vincent pulled over at a park and turned to face her. "Why would you be in trouble, sweetheart?" "Because of the things I said about you. The things Mommy taught me to say." Vincent's heart clenched, but he kept his voice steady. "Sophie, you're 8 years old. It's not your job to understand grown-up problems or to take sides between Mommy and Daddy. You did what you thought you were supposed to do." "But I knew it was wrong," Sophie whispered. "You never scared me. You never hurt me. Mommy made me practice saying those things, and I knew they weren't true." Vincent unbuckled his seatbelt and pulled his daughter into his arms. "You're not responsible for what grown-ups do, Sophie. Not ever. And I promise you, we're never going to put you in that position again. Is Mommy going to jail? I don't know. But whatever happens, you and I are going to be okay. We're going to build a life that's honest and safe and full of love." That Monday, Vincent received 2 calls that confirmed his strategy was working perfectly. The first was from Tommy Castellano. "Your friend Ryan is awake," Tommy reported. "Seems he's very motivated to discuss his debt situation. In fact, he's so motivated that he's agreed to leave town permanently. Funny thing, he doesn't seem interested in tennis instruction anymore." "I'm glad he found clarity," Vincent replied. The second call was from Luis, who'd been monitoring Lydia's communications. "She's falling apart," Luis reported. 37 calls to Ryan's phone, none answered. She tried to access their joint accounts and found most of the money gone. Her lawyer is demanding a $50,000 retainer that she can't pay. And her apartment? Lease expires next week. The landlord received an anonymous tip about unauthorized occupancy and noise complaints. He's not renewing. Vincent had spent years studying pressure points, physical, psychological, and financial. Lydia was discovering that her comfortable life had been built on foundations that only existed at Vincent's discretion. Wednesday brought the psychological evaluation report. Dr. Angela Reeves, the court-appointed psychologist, had spent 3 hours with Lydia and emerged with a damning assessment. Mrs. Caldwell exhibits significant narcissistic tendencies and a disturbing willingness to manipulate her child for personal gain, the report read. Her attempts to justify coaching Sophie to lie about her father suggest a fundamental inability to prioritize her child's welfare over her own desires. Continued unsupervised contact with a minor child is not recommended. That afternoon, Lydia appeared at Vincent's office without warning. His security guard called ahead, giving Vincent time to prepare for her arrival. She looked terrible. Her usual perfect appearance was disheveled, her designer clothes wrinkled, her makeup smeared. When she entered his office, she was barely holding herself together. "Vincent, please," she said without preamble. "Can we talk? Really talk?" "Of course. Have a seat." Lydia collapsed into the chair across from his desk. "I know you're angry. I know I made mistakes. But this has gone too far. I lost the apartment. My lawyer dropped me. Ryan won't return my calls." "Ryan's in the wind," Vincent said calmly. "Apparently, his gambling debts caught up with him. He left town rather suddenly. You did this. I know you did this." "Lydia, I'm a security consultant, not a miracle worker. I can't control other people's poor decisions. Please," she begged. "I'll do anything to stop this. Let me see Sophie. Let me keep the house." Vincent studied his wife's face. 3 weeks ago, she'd been confident in her ability to destroy him. Now she was begging for mercy she'd never intended to show him. "You want to see Sophie?" he asked. "Yes. God, yes. She's my daughter. She's my daughter too. But you try to turn her into a weapon against me. You taught an 8-year-old child to lie about feeling afraid of her father. What kind of mother does that?" Lydia's composure cracked completely. "I was scared. I thought if I could make you look bad, I could take Sophie somewhere safe, somewhere you couldn't control us." "Control you?" "Lydia, I gave you everything. I trusted you with my home, my child, my life. And you repaid that trust by planning to destroy me. I made a mistake." "No," Vincent said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "A mistake is forgetting to pick up groceries. A mistake is being late for dinner. You orchestrated a campaign to alienate my daughter from me, to frame me as an abuser, to steal everything I've built. That wasn't a mistake, Lydia. That was war. What do you want? What will it take? Vincent stood and walked to his window. The city stretched out below him, his city, his domain. I want you to understand something, Lydia. You declared war on the wrong man. I spent my life dealing with people who threaten what I protect. I've never lost, and I've never shown mercy to anyone who tried to harm my family. Sophie is my family too. Sophie is an innocent child caught in the crossfire of your ambition, and I will protect her from you, just like I'd protect her from any other threat. Lydia was crying now, mascara streaking down her cheeks. Please, Vincent, I'm begging you. I'll sign anything, agree to anything. Just let me have some part of my life back. Vincent turned to face her. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to continue your supervised visitation with Sophie, 2 hours a week with a social worker present. You're going to move out of my house by Friday. You're going to attend psychological counseling for a minimum of 6 months. And you're going to accept that your decisions have consequences. What about money? I can't afford. According to the post-nuptial agreement you signed, your adultery triggers the penalty clauses. You forfeit any claim to marital assets, including spousal support. You'll receive exactly what you brought into this marriage. Nothing. That's not legal. No judge will. Judge Hamilton already enforced the agreement. You signed it willingly, with full legal representation. It's ironclad. Lydia stared at him, finally understanding the scope of what he'd done. You planned this. All of it. The agreement, the evidence, everything. I defended myself and my daughter against someone who tried to destroy us. If you want to call that planning, go ahead. This isn't over. Vincent smiled, the same cold expression that had terrified enemy combatants in Afghanistan. Yes, Lydia, it is. Chapter 6, Tightening the Noose. Friday arrived with autumn rain that turned the October afternoon gray and cold. Vincent watched from his office window as Lydia's BMW pulled into the driveway of what had been their home for 8 years. He'd given her until 6 p.m. to collect her personal belongings and leave her keys. Sophie was at school, spared from witnessing her mother's final defeat. Vincent had arranged for his daughter to stay with Emma again this weekend while he completed the transition. At 5:47 p.m., Lydia's car disappeared down the street for the last time. Luis appeared in Vincent's doorway with a tablet in hand. Final security sweep is complete. She took clothes, jewelry, and some photographs. Left everything else, including the items that legally belonged to her family. Interesting choice, Vincent mused. Lydia's grandmother's china, her mother's paintings, photo albums spanning Sophie's entire life, all abandoned in her haste to escape. There's more, Luis continued. Her mother called 3 times while she was packing. Lydia never answered. Vincent wasn't surprised. Lydia's parents had always disapproved of her marriage to Vincent, considering him beneath their social status. But they tolerated him for the financial security he provided their daughter. Now that security was gone, and Lydia would have to face their disappointment along with everything else. Monday brought news that both satisfied and concerned Vincent. Detective Grove called with an update on the district attorney's investigation. They're moving forward with charges, she reported. Filing false reports, attempted perjury, and child endangerment. The evidence you provided makes it an easy case. Timeline: arrest warrant should be issued within the week. Vincent, are you sure you want to go this far? She's still Sophie's mother. Vincent stared at Sophie's latest drawing, hanging in the place of honor on his office wall. This one showed just the two of them holding hands in front of a house with a rainbow overhead. No apology written in the corner this time. Patricia, what kind of message does it send to Sophie if I let someone who tried to psychologically abuse her face no consequences? What kind of man would I be if I allowed anyone, to threaten my daughter's well-being without responding? I understand. Just make sure you can live with this. I've lived with worse. That evening, Vincent picked up Sophie from school and took her to their favorite restaurant. Over dinner, he explained that Mommy wouldn't be living with them anymore, but that they'd still see each other during special visits. Are you sad, Daddy? Sophie asked, studying his face with 8-year-old intensity. I'm sad that things happened the way they did, Vincent said honestly. But I'm not sad that it's just you and me now. We're going to have great adventures together. Can we get a dog? Vincent laughed. the first genuine laugh he'd had in weeks. "We can definitely get a dog." Wednesday brought the news Vincent had been expecting. Luis burst into his office with unusual excitement. "She's been arrested," Luis announced. "Picked her up at her mother's house in Connecticut." The parents weren't pleased. Vincent felt a moment of satisfaction, followed immediately by concern for Sophie. His daughter would hear about this, probably at school, where children always knew more than adults expected. "Luis, I want you to prepare a security assessment for Sophie's school. If any reporters or social workers try to approach her, I want to know immediately." "Already done. I've also reached out to that private school you mentioned, Riverside Academy. They're very experienced with high-profile custody situations." Vincent nodded. Riverside was expensive, exclusive, and discreet. Sophie would get an excellent education surrounded by children whose families understood the value of privacy. Thursday evening brought an unexpected visitor. Vincent was helping Sophie with homework when his security system announced a car in the driveway. The cameras showed a familiar face, Dr. Amanda Rivera, the marriage counselor who documented Lydia's lies. "Dr. Rivera," Vincent said, opening the door. "This is unexpected. Mr. Caldwell, I hope you don't mind the intrusion. I want to speak with you about Sophie's well-being during this transition." They spoke in Vincent's study while Sophie finished her homework in the kitchen. Dr. Rivera's concerns were professional but pointed. "Vincent, I've been reviewing my sessions with you and Lydia. Your wife clearly had significant psychological issues, and your response has been comprehensive. But I'm concerned about Sophie's long-term emotional health." "In what way?" "Children need stability and predictability. You've removed every trace of her mother from her life very quickly. That can be traumatic, even when the mother was problematic." Vincent considered this. In his focus on protecting Sophie from Lydia's manipulation, had he overcorrected? "What do you recommend?" "Therapy for Sophie, obviously, but also consider allowing her to keep some connection to positive memories of her mother. Not contact given the legal situation, but perhaps some photographs, some mementos. Children need to process these losses, not have them erased." That night, after Sophie was asleep, Vincent retrieved the photo albums Lydia had abandoned. He spent an hour looking through pictures of birthday parties, Christmas mornings, family vacations. In many of them, Lydia looked genuinely happy, genuinely loving towards Sophie. The woman who'd tried to destroy him had also been the woman who'd sung lullabies to their daughter, who'd bandaged scraped knees and read bedtime stories. Sophie deserved to remember that version of her mother, even if that woman was gone. Vincent selected several dozen photographs and had them professionally mounted in a new album. On the first page, he wrote, "Memories of Mommy and Sophie's happy times." Friday afternoon, Lydia's bail hearing made the local news. Vincent watched the coverage with grim satisfaction as reporters described the charges against the prominent socialite. Lydia's arrest photo showed her disheveled and desperate, a far cry from the confident woman who'd signed divorce papers 3 weeks earlier. But Vincent's satisfaction was tempered by something unexpected, Sophie's reaction. His daughter had been unusually quiet since seeing the news coverage at a friend's house. That evening, she approached him with tears in her eyes. "Daddy, is Mommy in jail because of me?" Vincent knelt down and pulled Sophie into his arms. "No, sweetheart. Mommy is facing consequences for choices she made, adult choices that had nothing to do with you. But if I hadn't told you about the drawing..." "Sophie, listen to me. You told me the truth, and truth is always the right choice. What happened to Mommy happened because of what Mommy did, not because you were honest with your father." As Vincent comforted his daughter, he realized that his war with Lydia had produced unexpected casualties. Sophie would grow up knowing her mother was a convicted criminal. She'd have to explain to friends why she only saw her mother during supervised visits. She'd carry the psychological scars of being caught between her parents' conflict. Vincent had won the war, but victory came with a price that would last long after Lydia served her sentence. Chapter 7. The Final Gambit. 3 months after Lydia's arrest, Vincent received a call that changed everything. Sophie was at Riverside Academy, thriving in her new environment, when Janet Morrison, Lydia's former attorney, requested a meeting. I know this is unusual, Morrison said over the phone, but I think we need to discuss your wife's situation. There's been a development. They met at Morrison's office downtown, a sleek space designed to intimidate opposing counsel. But Morrison seemed subdued, almost apologetic. Vincent, I need to be direct with you. Lydia's psychological evaluation in prison has revealed some troubling information. She's been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder and severe narcissistic traits. The doctors believe she was experiencing a psychotic break during the period when she was planning the divorce. Vincent said nothing, waiting for the real reason for this meeting. The thing is, Morrison continued, the prosecution is considering a plea deal. Psychiatric treatment instead of prison time. But there's a condition. They want assurance that Sophie won't be in danger if Lydia returns to society. Sophie is never going to be in danger from her mother again, Vincent said flatly. I believe you. But Vincent, Lydia's parents are asking for mercy. They want to work out some kind of arrangement where she can eventually rebuild a relationship with Sophie. Vincent leaned back in his chair. What kind of arrangement? They're prepared to establish a trust fund for Sophie's education and future needs. $2 million, with the stipulation that Lydia be allowed supervised visitation rights that could potentially expand as she completes treatment. $2 million. Vincent didn't need the money, but it would secure Sophie's future completely. It was also a tacit admission from Lydia's family that their daughter had been wrong, that Vincent had been the victim. There's something else, Morrison added. Lydia wants to write Sophie a letter. She wants to apologize, to try to explain why she did what she did. She's not asking for forgiveness, just a chance to give Sophie closure. Vincent considered this. Dr. Rivera had emphasized the importance of helping Sophie process her feelings about her mother. A letter might provide that opportunity. I'll read the letter first, Vincent said finally. If it's appropriate, I'll share it with Sophie. As for the visitation, we'll see how she does in treatment. That evening, Vincent sat in his study with Lydia's letter. Her handwriting was shaky, her words carefully chosen. My dearest Sophie, Daddy has probably told you that I made some very bad choices, and he's right. I hurt people I love, including you, and I'm very sorry for that. I want you to know that none of what happened was your fault. You are a beautiful, smart, wonderful little girl, and you deserve so much better than what I put you through. I'm sick, Sophie. Not the kind of sick where you have a fever, but the kind of sick that makes your thoughts confused and scary. I'm getting help for that sickness, and I hope someday I can be the mother you deserve. I love you more than all the stars in the sky. I always will, and I'm proud that you have Daddy to take care of you. He's a good man, and he loves you very much. Love always, Mommy. Vincent read the letter twice, then set it aside. It was honest, age-appropriate, and free of manipulation. More importantly, it acknowledged Vincent's role as Sophie's protector rather than undermining it. The next day, Vincent had a long conversation with Dr. Rivera about how to present the letter to Sophie. They decided to read it together during one of Sophie's therapy sessions, giving her a safe space to process her emotions. Sophie's reaction surprised Vincent. After Dr. Rivera finished reading the letter, his daughter was quiet for a long time. Then she looked up at Vincent with those serious blue eyes. Daddy, can I write her back? What would you want to say? That I hope she gets better, and that I love her too, but I'm happy living with you. 6 months later, Vincent stood in a courtroom for Lydia's sentencing hearing. She'd pleaded guilty to all charges in exchange for a sentence of 1 year in a psychiatric facility, followed by 5 years of supervised probation. Lydia looked different, thinner, older, but somehow more present than she'd been during their marriage. When Judge Hamilton asked if she had anything to say before sentencing, she stood and turned toward Vincent. Your Honor, I'd like to apologize to my former husband and my daughter. I put them through hell because of my own mental illness and selfishness. Mr. Caldwell was right to protect Sophie from me, and I hope someday I can earn back a small part of their trust. Vincent said nothing, but he noticed that Lydia no longer referred to herself as Sophie's mother. She'd accepted that her actions had cost her that title. After the hearing, Lydia's parents approached Vincent in the hallway. Margaret Ashton looked older than her 68 years, worn down by her daughter's disgrace and the family's social humiliation. "Vincent," she said quietly, "we want to thank you for agreeing to the trust fund arrangement and for allowing Sophie to correspond with Lydia. Sophie deserves financial security," Vincent replied, "and she deserves the chance to understand her mother's illness without being victimized by it." "You could have destroyed us all," Margaret continued. "Our reputation, our business connections, everything. Instead, you've been remarkably restrained." Vincent looked at this woman who'd once considered him unworthy of her daughter. "Mrs. Ashton, I'm not interested in destroying innocent people. I protect what matters to me, and I eliminate threats to my family. You and your husband were never threats." As Vincent walked to his car, he reflected on the past year. He'd won completely, gained custody of Sophie, destroyed Lydia's plans, secured their financial future, and even managed to create a path for Sophie to have some relationship with her mother if she chose. But victory felt different than he'd expected. The man who'd once eliminated enemies without hesitation had found himself showing mercy to a woman who'd tried to destroy him. Perhaps Sophie's influence was making him softer. Or perhaps true strength lay in knowing when to show restraint. Either way, Vincent Caldwell had proven once again that he was not a man to be crossed. The story would become legend in their social circles, a cautionary tale about the dangers of underestimating a quiet man with dangerous skills. Chapter 8. New Foundations. 2 years after the divorce was finalized, Vincent stood in the kitchen of his new home, watching Sophie play with their German Shepherd puppy, Rex, in the backyard. They'd moved 6 months ago, leaving a house that held too many memories of deception and betrayal. This new place was different, smaller but warmer, chosen by Sophie after they'd looked at dozens of properties together. It had a bigger yard for Rex, a swimming pool, and most importantly, no shadows of the past. Sophie was 10 now, taller and more confident. The timid little girl who'd apologized through her drawings had grown into a thoughtful young woman who spoke her mind and trusted her instincts. Her weekly therapy sessions with Dr. Rivera had helped her process the trauma of her parents' divorce, and she seemed genuinely happy. The phone rang, interrupting Vincent's morning coffee. It was Dr. Rivera. "Vincent, I wanted to discuss Sophie's latest evaluation. She's doing remarkably well, better than most children who've experienced similar trauma." "She's resilient," Vincent said, watching his daughter teach Rex to sit. "She is. But Vincent, she's also asked some pointed questions about her mother lately. She wants to know if she can visit Lydia." Vincent felt his chest tighten. Lydia had been released from psychiatric care 8 months ago and was living in a supervised halfway house in Connecticut. She completed her treatment program, held down a job at her parents' gallery, and adhered strictly to her probation requirements. More importantly, her monthly letters to Sophie had shown genuine growth. Gone was the manipulative woman who tried to turn their daughter into a weapon. In her place was someone who seemed to understand the harm she'd caused and was genuinely committed to change. "What's your professional opinion?" Vincent asked. "I think it could be beneficial for Sophie. She needs to see her mother as a real person, not just a villain from her childhood, but would have to be carefully supervised and controlled." That evening, Vincent sat down with Sophie after dinner. She was reading a book about horses, her latest obsession, while Rex slept at her feet. "Sophie, Dr. Rivera says you've been asking about visiting Mommy." She looked up from her book, her expression serious. "I've been thinking about her. I know she did bad things, but I still love her. Is that wrong?" Vincent's heart ached for his daughter's confusion. "It's not wrong to love someone even when they've hurt you, sweetheart. Love doesn't just disappear because someone makes mistakes. Do you still love her?" The question caught Vincent off guard. Did he still love Lydia? The woman who'd betrayed him was gone, replaced by someone who seemed genuinely remorseful. But love? That had died the moment he'd discovered her deception. "I care about her as your mother," he said carefully. "I want her to be healthy and safe because that's what's best for you. But the love I had for her as my wife, that's gone, Sophie. Some things can't be repaired." Sophie nodded slowly. "I understand, but I think I'd like to see her. Just to talk." The visit was arranged for the following Saturday at the halfway house. Vincent drove Sophie to Connecticut, both of them nervous for different reasons. The facility was clean but institutional, designed to ease former patients back into society. Lydia was waiting in the visitor's room, and Vincent was struck by how much she'd changed. Gone was the polished socialite he'd married. This woman wore simple clothes, minimal makeup, and carried herself with a humility he'd never seen before. "Sophie," Lydia said softly, tears immediately filling her eyes. "You've grown so much." "Hi, Mommy," Sophie replied, suddenly shy. Vincent watched carefully as mother and daughter awkwardly hugged. A social worker supervised from across the room, taking notes on their interaction. "I brought you something," Sophie said, pulling a drawing from her backpack. It showed a woman with long brown hair standing next to a rainbow. At the bottom, Sophie had written, "Get well soon, Mommy." Lydia held the drawing like it was made of glass. "It's beautiful, sweetheart. I'm going to hang it in my room." They talked for an hour about safe topics, Sophie's school, her friends, Rex the dog. Lydia asked careful questions and listened intently to every answer. She never tried to criticize Vincent or their new life, never attempted to guilt Sophie about the time they'd lost. Most importantly, she never asked Sophie to keep secrets or pass along messages to Vincent. As they prepared to leave, Lydia turned to Vincent. "Thank you for bringing her. I know how difficult this must be for you." "Sophie needed this," Vincent replied. "She needs to understand who you are now, not just who you were. I'll never be able to undo the damage I caused, but I'm grateful for any chance to be part of her life, even if it's just visits like this." On the drive home, Sophie was unusually quiet. Finally, she spoke. "Daddy, she seems different." "How so?" "Sadder, but also nicer, like she really listened to me instead of just waiting for her turn to talk." Vincent nodded. "People can change, Sophie. It doesn't excuse what they did wrong, but sometimes they can become better versions of themselves." "Are you still angry at her?" Vincent considered this question seriously. Was he still angry? The rage that had driven him to destroy Lydia's life had cooled over the years. What remained was a kind of cold pragmatism. He'd do whatever was necessary to protect Sophie, but he no longer felt the need to actively punish Lydia. "I'm not angry anymore," he said finally, "but I'm also not going to forget what happened. Trust has to be earned back slowly, and some things can never be completely forgiven." "I think I understand." That night, Vincent sat in his study reviewing security reports from his company. Business was booming. His reputation for protecting clients from threats had only grown after word spread about how he'd handled his own domestic crisis. His phone buzzed with a text from Dr. Rivera. "Sophie seems very positive about today's visit. I think monthly visits would be beneficial if you're comfortable with that." Vincent typed back, "We'll try monthly visits for 6 months and reassess." As he set down his phone, Vincent realized something had shifted inside him. For 2 years, he'd been focused on protecting Sophie from her mother. Now, he was facilitating their relationship because Sophie needed it. The change surprised him. The man who'd once sworn never to forgive or forget was learning that true strength sometimes meant knowing when to show mercy, not for the benefit of those who'd wronged him, but for the sake of the innocent people caught in the aftermath. Sophie needed her mother, and Vincent loved Sophie more than he hated Lydia. In the end, that love would guide his decisions, just as it always had. Chapter 9. Unbreakable Bonds. 5 years had passed since that first drawing that changed everything. Sophie was now 13, tall for her age with Vincent's determined jaw and his blue eyes that seemed to see everything. She was an honor student at Riverside Academy, captain of the equestrian team, and showed the same analytical mind that had made her father successful. Vincent watched from the fence as Sophie guided her horse, Aurora, through a complex jumping course. Her movements were precise, confident. She'd inherited his ability to remain calm under pressure. "She's remarkable," said a voice behind him. Vincent turned to see Dr. Rivera approaching, her hair now showing more gray, but her eyes as sharp as ever. "Amanda, what brings you to Sophie's practice?" "I wanted to talk to you about something. Sophie's been seeing me for 5 years now, and I think it's time to consider whether she still needs regular therapy." Vincent raised an eyebrow. "You're firing your patient?" "I'm graduating her. Sophie has processed her trauma remarkably well. She has a healthy relationship with both parents, she's academically and socially successful, and she's developed excellent coping mechanisms. Continued therapy might actually be counterproductive at this point. They watched Sophie complete her course flawlessly, then trot Aurora over to the fence where they stood. "Dad, did you see that last jump?" Aurora barely touched the rail. "I saw. You two make a good team." Sophie dismounted and began untacking Aurora. "Dr. Rivera, are you here to see me?" "Actually, I'm here to tell you that I think our regular sessions can come to an end. You've done all the hard work of healing, Sophie. You don't need me anymore." Sophie paused in loosening Aurora's girth. "Because I'm fixed?" "Because you were never broken," Dr. Rivera replied gently. "You were hurt, and you healed. That's what healthy people do." Later that evening, Vincent and Sophie sat on their back porch watching the sunset. Rex, now 5 years old and perfectly trained, lay at Sophie's feet. These quiet moments had become precious to Vincent. Time when they could simply exist together without the weight of the past pressing down on them. "Dad, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Do you ever regret what you did to Mom? I mean, the way you destroyed her life?" Vincent was quiet for a long moment. This conversation had been inevitable, and he'd been preparing for it for years. "Sophie, I did what I thought was necessary to protect you. Your mother was trying to turn you against me and take you away. I couldn't let that happen. But you could have just gotten divorced. You didn't have to send her to prison. Your mother committed crimes, Sophie. She filed false police reports, tried to coach you to lie under oath, and attempted to defraud me financially. The prison sentence was a consequence of her choices, not my revenge." Sophie pulled her knees up to her chest. "I know. I understand that logically. But sometimes I wonder, if you could do it over again, would you handle it differently?" Vincent studied his daughter's face. She was asking whether he was the kind of man who destroyed people unnecessarily, whether his love for her had made him cruel. "If your mother had simply asked for a divorce, we could have worked out custody arrangements like civilized adults. If she'd been honest about her feelings about Ryan, about wanting a different life, I would have been hurt, but I would have tried to do what was best for you. But she didn't do that. No, she declared war on me, Sophie. She tried to take you away using lies and manipulation. And once someone declares war on Vincent Caldwell, he let the sentence hang in the air. You destroy them completely," Sophie finished. "I protect what matters to me. Always. Without exception." Sophie was quiet for several minutes, processing this. "The kids at school sometimes talk about you. They say you're scary, that their parents warn them not to cross the Caldwell family." Vincent felt a chill. "And what do you think about that?" "I think you're the safest person I know to love, because you do anything to protect the people you care about. But I also think you're the most dangerous person to betray." Her words were spoken matter-of-factly, without fear or judgment. Sophie understood exactly who her father was and had made peace with it. "Does that frighten you?" Vincent asked. "No, it makes me feel safe. But Dad, I also think Mom has suffered enough. She lost everything. Her home, her reputation, her daughter. She's been in therapy for 6 years now. She works at Grandpa's gallery and lives in a tiny apartment. Don't you think she's paid for what she did?" Vincent considered this. Lydia's monthly visits with Sophie had continued for 3 years now. She was punctual, respectful, and never overstepped boundaries. She asked about Sophie's life, but never pried. She sent appropriate birthday and Christmas gifts. She'd become harmless. "What are you asking, Sophie? I'd like to spend some real time with her. Maybe a weekend visit. I know it would have to be supervised, but I think I'm old enough now to handle it." Vincent's first instinct was to refuse. But as he looked at Sophie, 13 years old and wise beyond her years, he realized she wasn't asking out of childish sentimentality. She was making a mature decision about her relationship with her mother. "I'll consider it," he said finally. Really? But Sophie, you need to understand something. If your mother ever tries to manipulate you again, ever tries to turn you against me, or make you keep secrets, that relationship ends permanently. I won't give her a third chance to hurt you. I understand. And Dad, I would tell you if she did anything like that. I learned my lesson about keeping secrets. The weekend visit was arranged for the following month. Lydia would take Sophie to her parents' house in Connecticut for Saturday and Sunday, with a social worker checking in twice daily. Vincent drove Sophie to the meeting point, a neutral location where Lydia was waiting with her car. His ex-wife looked nervous but hopeful as Sophie hugged her goodbye. "Vincent," Lydia said quietly, "thank you for trusting me with this." "I'm not trusting you, Lydia. I'm trusting Sophie. Don't make me regret it." That weekend was the longest 48 hours of Vincent's life. He paced his house, cleaned his guns, reorganized his office, and generally drove himself crazy with worry. When Sophie finally called Sunday evening to say she was ready to come home, Vincent was in his car within minutes. "How was it?" he asked as they drove home. "Good. Different. We went to the museum, and Grandma made her famous pot roast. Mom and I talked a lot about everything. She told me about her mental illness, about how it made her think and feel. She explained why she did what she did without making excuses for it. And I think I understand her better now. She's still my mom, but she's also just a person who made terrible mistakes and is trying to be better." Vincent nodded. "That's a very mature way to look at it. Dad, she asked me to tell you something. She wanted me to say that she's grateful for the way you've handled everything. She knows she doesn't deserve your mercy, but she's grateful for it anyway." "What did you tell her?" "I told her that you're not merciful. You're practical, and that it's practical for me to have a relationship with my mother as long as she doesn't threaten our family." Vincent smiled despite himself. Sophie had inherited more than his eyes and determination. She'd inherited his ability to see situations clearly, without sentiment clouding her judgment. That night, as Vincent tucked Sophie into bed, a ritual they'd maintained despite her protests that she was too old, she looked up at him with those serious blue eyes. "Dad, I want you to know something. I love Mom, and I'm glad I can have a relationship with her. But you're my hero. You're the one who protected me when I needed protection. You're the one who taught me to be strong and honest and brave. You're the parent I want to be like when I grow up." Vincent felt his throat tighten with emotion. "Sophie, you're already everything I could have hoped for in a daughter. You're kind without being weak, strong without being cruel, and smart without being arrogant. You're better than I ever was. I learned from the best." As Vincent turned off Sophie's light and closed her door, he reflected on the journey that had brought them here. 8 years ago, a child's drawing had revealed a betrayal that nearly destroyed his family. His response had been swift, brutal, and complete, exactly what the situation required. But the real victory wasn't in destroying Lydia or Ryan or anyone else who'd threatened him. The real victory was the young woman sleeping safely in the room behind him, strong, confident, and completely secure in her father's love. Vincent Caldwell had spent his life protecting people and eliminating threats. But his greatest achievement would always be raising a daughter who understood the difference between strength and cruelty, between justice and revenge. Sophie would never need anyone to fight her battles for her. She would never be anyone's victim, and she would never, ever underestimate the power of a quiet man who loved his family more than his own life. The war was over. Love had won. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.